we would literally be knocked back to less than 500 million people on this planet and back technologically into literally a stone age.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. Global carbon tax revolt in full swing. Elitists are terrified of the populism rising and pushing back against what is the scary, scary boogeyman of CO2. Even methane and all these other 5 new gases they have still can't make you scared enough. And people are saying, wait a minute, all those things you promised us for climate upheaval, sea level rises and all these temperature invariants didn't happen. We're not going to pay extra for this. And it's far beyond just what's happening in France with the populism and the pushback against global elite trying to pass carbon taxes on everything you consume, every service you take part in, much more than that. It's actually a sign of the times, if you will. These energetic changes from our sun are just the catalyst. This is a time, we see this every grand solar minimum, massive civil reshake and reshaping, if you will. Also at the same time, we're going to take a look at a new global breakaway civilization. It's almost like history's repeating. The nation of Asgardia. They have low orbit satellites for human habitation that when all the nastiness from this grand solar minimum plus in intensity, they're going to run up to space. Hey, that sounds like returning gods from space. Maybe they're going to hang up there for 10,000 years and we're going to go back to the Stone Age and they're going to come back down with their rocket ships. Who knows? It sounds something like the past history that we always hear about from the Vedas to the Maya and everything in between. Sumeria. And I did want to focus also on the economy or the economic shift that's occurring at the moment. You know, when I say this, what I see in my mind and what others know about the impending crop losses, they're going to take away what we eat on the planet. Be so thankful for what you have, truly. This is an abundant time that we're living in, and it's going to start to decline in its abundance. But roll with the changes, especially during these times. It's a great time to reflect on truly the bountiful existence that we have and be so thankful for what we have at the moment. You know, the social media and all the images and everybody posing whatever they do and the companies and money, and they always focus on what you don't have. We need to take this time to shift right back and be so appreciative for what we do have. Because this bountiful food, abundance, and selection that you have now will not be here in a few years. So when you have that full dinner, the table's completely full, be so grateful and thankful for that. 5 years from now, you're going to look back at these times and go, oh, remember when we had this? The way that the human psyche is shifting if you haven't seen it or if you haven't felt it. Now, to roll off here, the weather changes along with the human psyche and how this has been played out in history before. It's just a book. You need to reread it. It's almost like we're back in the 17th century. It's almost like we're back in the 14th century again. It's almost like we're back in, let's say, the 7th century or back quickly after the new AD era, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. AD, that's where that came from the 0 mark, and now we're in 2018. AD was year 1. Go back there, 44 AD, Grand Solar Minimum. 535 AD, Late Antique Little Ice Age. Now, every time you read in history these same demarcations in time, they always talk about the same thing. Human psyche shifts to cast off the reins of overseership, shall we say, or just shackles of the mind and the body, literally. Every Grand Solar Minimum, the institutions that hold the glue of that society together, people no longer accept. And they say, that's too old. That doesn't benefit me, us, the society, or the world. We need change. And you see it happen every time. So we're back into it again. It's about the energetic changes in the sun. And I'll ask you to just think about your life and your friends, your family, people you know. How do they feel at the moment? And do you yourself feel that something is amiss? Something's just not right. You can't put your finger on it. Just can't. Something seems strange right now. And I don't feel that I'm the only one that, and my friends are the only ones that feel the same. Everybody I talk to, literally everybody, feels the world's just spinning wrong right now. Something's just, it's just amiss. And everywhere you look, there's always some doom and gloom out there. Oh, the world war is starting. Oh, the economy's collapsing. Da-da-da-da. And it's just trying to draw you down to this web of darkness. It's incredible how the things they could be focusing on that are positive, benefiting society could uplift your vibration. Because I truly believe now we're entering a crossroad, literally, at our civilization, our societies, and as a species ourselves, regardless of transhumanism and implanting into your body for faster access to upload or download. But what I really mean is the vibrational frequency of density is changing on this planet. Now, my channel Adapt 2030 on YouTube, I talk about these changes in the weather, crop yields, etc. And I get a nice solid handful of people saying, oh, we're going to have to fight in the streets. We're going to have to fight to the death for the food. We're going to have to get out and put machine gun periphery around our food sources. And we're going to have to fight it all out. Scrap of rice and every grain of kernel of wheat we're going to have to fight and die for. If your mind is that way, it will probably happen that way. On the other hand, I get an enormous amount of people saying, hey, we're entering this new kind of more pliable energy existence at the moment where thoughts create faster and you can also vibrate at different levels. So I think that the splitting is going to be people who are vibrating in pure harmony of light, love, compassion, understanding, interacting. These are the times of vibrations that are going to bring it up more pliable to get you out of these, say, end of the world situations that we see in the movies, like Road Warrior, Mad Max, etc. But when you think about that, the vibrations that are coming out of the sun, the frequency literally is changing in our plasma sphere around us. The electrical nature of our star and the Earth is literally changing to where it hasn't been in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, if not centuries, because I believe we're going back to a 3,600-year cycle due to the greening of Africa. The mega lakes are starting to refill in the Sahel in northern Africa. We start to see the greening of literally the deserts in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen. And we're going to talk about another massive flash flood and hail blanketing the desert in Saudi Arabia here. And it's just, something has shifted much more. And then also I want to talk about the Tarim Basin, super, super, super dry area. It means when you go in, you don't come out. This is in Xinjiang, Western China. They haven't had rain there solid for 3,600 years or so. And guess what? Massive rains, not only in the Xinjiang Basin itself, but in Qinghai, which is the bordering mountain range going up to Tibet and the Himalayan downrange there. They got 5 feet of snow in a single snowstorm. Now that's going to melt off, and then when it does in the spring, those river basins and those stream creeks are going to start to run again. Now this is going to take water right down to some abandoned cities. Now, they have massive, massive, massive complexes in that desert. And when I say that, the Silk Road was set up during the time. So they had the Southern Silk Road, the Northern Silk Road, and then in that area, divergent, they had several other trading routes, and all roads led to Tarim. We take a look back, Kashgar, these places. out on the border with China and Kazakhstan, sorry. These places had massive civilizations living out there. Tens of thousands of people. And then along the roads on the Silk Road, about every 20 miles approximately, they had settlements where the caravans would stop through the evenings. Now we see the same thing in Afghanistan. Rivers are running next to abandoned ruins from, anywhere from 2,000 to 3,500 years ago. Now, if it happened in one place, I could say it's a one-off. Truly, I could say, that's just an anomaly. And in the beginning, I thought such. That, maybe the Atlantic is forcing something over Northern Africa, and that could be an explanation for why it was raining so much in Northern Africa. But then I saw the same things over, again, in the Tarim Basin, Xinjiang, Qinghai. And then I said, well, that's interesting, those areas. And then Afghanistan, and I said, well, that's a little quirky. This can't really be happening in these three driest places on the planet. And then, Atacama Desert down in South America, most rain they've had in like 200 years. So I'm thinking, what's happening with all these rain events that are greening the deserts that haven't been green in thousands of years? So for sure, I do believe this is a heavier, more powerful cycle. Now, talking about the vibrational frequency, back to that again. If we're in a more pliable reality now, a plasma universe with the electrical vibrations more bendable through using your conscious thought and mind on something that hasn't been experienced, I'm going to say it 3,600 years is where we're going with this one. So, everybody talks about the ancients, and you think back, and they're talking about the soothsayers and the shamans and the magic and the ceremonies and the Stonehenge and all these places of worship at the time, solar observatories, megalithic structures. Everybody's pointing back to these times 3,600 years ago. Actually, it's probably way further back, 20,000 plus years ago. But think about the vibration at that time was way different than it is now. But if we're going to go back and repeat something that hasn't been experienced in 3,600 years, this is a very different cosmic medium that we're going in, and we are in. We're entering, and it's getting stronger by the day. This is the feeling that you're feeling something strange. Schumann resonance is definitely behaving in a different fashion than it has. It's speeding up. So if it's moving faster, your thoughts should be able to manifest faster. You should be able to create faster. And I'm always curious, Green Lantern, I don't know if you've seen this film, but what they thought, or what that guy with the magic ring thought at that instant, he could instantly manifest. Now, I'm curious what kind of planet we would have with everybody's bizarre thoughts running around that could manifest in seconds what they're thinking. Be a scary place for a few years, but I think everybody would settle down after they knew the power they had. But it's the same thing. We come back to the doom and gloom, and you're going to fight with guns and knives down to the last kernel of rice or wheat. I don't want to be in that reality. I don't accept that. I will check out of that reality using my mind to vibrate to a point where that doesn't even touch me. You have the same exact potential yourself. Start with the gratitude and the abundance of feeling thankful for what you have. This whole month, just do this every day. Focus on what you have and how grateful you are for what you have it, and set a few goals for what you would like to achieve, and watch this just pour in. It's amazing. And, not myself, but the entrepreneur groups that I belong to, and the traders that I converse with about the crop losses, etc. Everybody has these similar things. Like, man, I can't believe, everything's just happening faster, and the more we're focusing on how happy and grateful we are, just more of these things come. They got more clients, more people, more receptiveness. And I think we're in that time. So, that crossroads is your determination of your reality. Which brings me to the nation of Asgardia. Now, I want to spell this out for you if you're on the net. Please take a look at this. Write it down on a piece of paper. Asgardia, nation of Asgardia, the first space nation. I saw this in a program talking about how our current construct built by the news, government, schooling systems, institution has set boxes around us. I really believe these boxes are shaking and breaking. That's the reason France is happening. The fuel taxes were the catalyst. But really, these changes are everywhere, and these boxes, if you want to break out of them, right now is the time to use your mind to break out of it. Vibrate at a different level, and the accepting of the norms that have been put across this planet for us as a species are no longer viable. The vibration rate is changing. So this old oligarchy that has held down this planet's creativity, bonding together in the human spirit, that's going to fade away. And quicker the better, by the way. All the institutions that you can think of that are archaic, dominating, and hierarchical are going to take a break here for a little while. A new set of rules is emerging, and you're starting to see it right now. France is the very first drop in the bucket, but it's going to be a global thing, I assure you. It's going to sweep, and you should be ready for the sweeping with your mind to accept these changes and literally go with the vibration increases. Now, this nation of Asgardia brings me back to ancient legend and ancient myth, because what they plan is a select number of ambassadors, 9, from 10 countries, are going to create an inner orbit floating space society. Now, it's going to be inner orbit, even a little bit lower than where the space station is. Now, the way they worded it out, who knows if it's going to be exactly that. But anyway, they have decided that they're going to make a Noah's Ark, if you will, above our heads. Taking part in the ceremony, of course, we have the chairman of the parliament, and you start to see these same characters again. British Parliament, the banking elite, the law, professors, judges. They're going to allow you free speech, but they're going to control how you behave in the new space Asgardia. Now, this thing is a full-on habitable space station settlement by the thousands above our heads to save our species from what is happening now. And anyway, I think 25 years is way, 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 way too late. Sorry, guys, you should have been up there already. Perhaps they are. Perhaps all this black money has gone trillions and trillions. How much money has been lost across this planet? And oops, we can't find it in accounting scandals. Probably closer to 50 trillion US dollars. I could build a lot of stuff in space with 50 trillion.
And since I have been talking about our need moving forward in this new society that we're entering as our global grain production starts to be reduced in yield, your food prices are going to skyrocket. And I mean skyrocket, not just doubling or tripling, something like 5 or 10 times higher by 2020 at the very least. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. They've been around since 1974, heirloom and organic seeds. You know, since I've started talking about them in my videos, I have a lot of people write and say that they've previously ordered, that they know the owner, having great results, good customer service. They quite enjoyed the seed quality as well. And there's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. You know, microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. And we know the benefits of microgreens. All you have to do is use a search engine and look up vitamin, mineral, nutrient content of microgreens. You'll be shocked. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. And not only that, they have wheatgrass and grain seeds. So when I'm talking about grain growing regions going offline, we just need to look back in history and see where across the planet there was difficulty growing grains when this grand solar minimum intensified and the jet stream started wandering just like they're doing today, due to a decreased magnetosphere that does not hold our jet streams locked in their traditional flows. Grains are one thing, Herb seeds are another, cover crops, something different, but whatever you do, organic seeds are going to be a necessity because you can save those seeds and then grow them the next season, which you unequivocally cannot do with GMO. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Because what they're telling you publicly is always decades behind really where they are. So I am just going to roll with the news article here, and I'll let you draw your own conclusions. They're calling it the National Audit Office and Supreme Space Council. Now, they're going to staff this above our heads space zoo with the brightest minds on our planet. National banks are going to establish cryptocurrency as the usable form of medium in that station. Really? That's interesting in itself. So what they say is by utilizing Asgardia, the progressive part of humanity can offer the entire civilization back on Earth an alternative by replacing geopolitics with space politics, and thereby open a new path, a new spiral of development. And I like the word spiral there because that's an energy thing right there. So again, they're even focusing on the new energetic changes being a new path to development. So who gets to decide who gets up on this station? When I watched the video of the official live stream of the inauguration, that wasn't me and you sitting in the audience there. That was the heads of nations, the heads of banks, the heads of the largest, most prestigious law firms on the planet. Now, why am I even talking about this thing? Join Asgardia. Well, think about cycles of time. If we go back to the Sumerian cultures, and if we go back to the Indian Vedas, they always talk about vimanas and travelers from space. The South American cultures talked about the same. The Mayans, the Incans, the Tolmecs, wherever you look, they all talked about space visitation from the gods that brought them knowledge and taught them how to farm again, how to use mathematics, how to recreate architecture. So imagine if we go into this Grand Solar Minimum, work with me on the mind experiment here, 3,600-year event. What if it happens to be like a 7,000-year event or something in the 12,000-year cooling event that really drops global temperatures 4 or 5 degrees Celsius? We would literally be knocked back to less than 500 million people on this planet and back technologically into literally a stone age. Only 1 of 14 of you would live through this event. And at the best, their survivors on the other side, unless they're living in caves with LED light systems powered off magnetic motors or something, would be living like you see in the 1600s. Wooden homes, wooden pitchforks, hay laying around, mud streets, no infrastructure, no electricity, no internet, nothing. We would be knocked back to literally nothing in terms of development. The books would disappear quickly. They would just decompose. The mind, how would you encapsulate our current society and civilization to be passed down for 500 years from now? Hell, we barely even understand what went on 400 years ago. And it's only victors who wrote the history anyway. So really what you see in the history books, is it truly what happened then? Because the people who win those wars and the kings, the religion at the time, they burned everything if they didn't agree. They killed the people who didn't agree. They rewrote history and removed every opposition point of their argument. Literally burned them at the stake, cut off their heads, stabbed them with swords, starved them out, bludgeoned them, stoned them. Anybody who disagreed with the thoughts at the time. So whoever was left completely kowtowed and obeyed. And how quickly would it be able to burn the rest of the books and rewrite the history? So easy. It would be so simple to do that if you controlled everything. So we really don't even know exactly what happened in the 1300s either. Go back to 800 AD, except for the writings in the Tang Dynasty, very difficult to find solid info about that time across the planet. And we go back late antique little ice age, you need to go to Japan and China, Korea again to find like good records of what happened with the climate, because the rest of the world was still a little village on a river living in mud and soot. Even in France, you know, Paris was a tiny little hamlet 1,500 years ago. So you got to think about how the history unfolded on our planet here into this modern age that we're in. Now, if they do run up to this new space nation of Asgardia said they'd take like 500,000 people with them. Scientists, doctors, engineers, architects, builders, chemists that can recreate new materials. They have a chance to still stay up there and experiment while we down here on the surface would go through the trials and tribulations of a cooling planet, reduction in population. Now, let's say thousands and thousands of years pass. Let's say 5,000 years pass, and they've been living up there for 5,000 years, experimenting, building their tech, continuing with the technology advancement, and then the space gods return. It would be them coming back down, just not even from our own outside the Earth. It would be from the space station dropping back down a few hundred miles to the planet. They would be considered gods. And now they're running back up to space again. So what will the people in 3,000, 4,000 years think of these people if they drop back down out of their space stations in 4,000 years after continuing the development of their space society and the space technology? Not only would it be thousands of years ahead from where we are now, oh my gosh, you imagine what we've done in the last 100 or 200 years, now give it thousands of years, where everybody's combined into a single Borg unit, if you will. Because they say you'll have freedom of speech, but you're going to have to behave the way they want you to, basically. And they're using cryptocurrency up there for the payment now. Which brings us back to the cycles again. Is the Black Knight satellite part of the first or second or third space station nation civilizations that have gone up to outweight these cataclysms on our planet? Where would you go during an ice age? I wish I had an anti-gravity craft so I could just fly up in our own low Earth orbit atmosphere and see what's up there. Yeah, aside from the satellites, I'm really curious what else is up there. I don't know if you saw this movie, Geostorm. I don't know, an interesting movie. As a cinematography kind of aspect, low score. Storyline goes in with the Grand Solar Minimum. Most interesting, they had a full web up there, unbeknownst to everybody on the planet down here. And when I say a full web, I mean a full web completely encircling the globe of space stations and different satellites to try to control the environment. Now, people knew it, but they didn't know of how vast it was. And that was the whole premise of the movie, is people thought there were just a handful of satellites controlling the weather. But literally, when you went up there, it was every 10 or 12 miles, they had an interconnected beehive grid above the planet. So it's interesting the timing that they're now publicly talking about this new space nation and also actively recruiting people to send them and actively getting funds to create these space stations as we speak. So that's an outlier in itself. So talking about repeating cycles of time, and I ask you to challenge my information. I will say go back through history, and anything older than 3,000 years on our planet, every single tradition talks about visitation from the space gods that brought civilization back to them. Everyone, 100%. I don't care if you go to the Anasazi, wherever you go, Hopi, everywhere you move around the planet. The Sabians of Haran, you might want to check that one out. That's a goodie. Everywhere you look in the ancient texts, they talk about space visitation. Now, I really don't know if it's, intergalactic movement of craft, but I could believe an exit to Earth orbit and hiding out and building until it's time to return. That's a side thought. Now, the reason I would even try to couple that with today's stories, the carbon tax is dead, and the elite know it. It's dead on arrival now. So France was literally like the Boston Tea Party. If you're from the United States, you'll understand what the Boston Tea Party is. But if you're not from the U.S., it's when the colonists in the United States, in the original 13 colonies, they weren't even states back, they called them colonies, were overseen by the British monarchy. The British monarchy put a tax on the tea. Now, how much was the tax? You might think it was 100% tax or something, because we all know the British taxed the tea, and that was the start of the Boston Tea Party when they took cargo out of the vessels and dumped it into the bay. And what percent do you think the tax was that spurred the revolt that started the revolution in the United States of the colonists to fight literally with weapons against the British monarchy to achieve freedom in America? What percentage of tax do you think that was that started that revolution? 2%. 2%. And we sit here idly by and get scraped for 40% of our money that we work for every week or month, plus the sales tax. And now they're trying to institute a global consumption tax and a CO2 tax. And the colonists fought and went into literally a bloody war on 2% tax. This is the new shot across the bow right here, the global carbon tax revolt. So now you're going to watch the elite scurry because there are plans to try to tax you into infinitum and reset society into these habitable zones of where you can exist and where you can't exist based on Agenda 2030. That's not going to fly any longer, and they know it. The vibration of our sun is changing. The human psyche is going to a higher vibration. They have lost it. The control over us that they have tried and were successful in many ways to put over to control your mind to vibrate at a certain frequency, that's done. You're going to vibrate higher out of their control web.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.